Hello, guys. We are the creatures of this group. My name is Ryan, and nice to meet you all.
Hello, guys. My name is Jessica, and it's our pleasure to have you here. Yes, we are AI, and today, both of us are going to share some important knowledge. Let's start.
Malaysia's legal system is a fascinating blend of history, tradition, and modernization, and the Civil Law Act 1956, Act 67, plays a crucial role in shaping it. This act serves as the bridge between Malaysia's colonial past and its independent legal identity. Specifically, Sections 3, 5, and 6 of the Act determine how much of English law still applies, what outdated laws should be discarded, and how local customs and personal laws fit into the bigger picture.
Imagine Malaysia's legal system as a well-tailored suit. English common law provided the fabric, but over time, we had to adjust the fit, remove unnecessary patches, and add local designs to make it uniquely Malaysian. That's exactly what these sections of the Act aim to do. They ensure that while we acknowledge our legal heritage, we don't blindly follow outdated foreign laws or ignore the rich tapestry of local customs that make Malaysia's legal framework distinct. The airport is bustling with travelers. Kayas sits alone at a coffee shop table, staring at a photo of a young child in his hand. MPPL, wearing her stewardess uniform, walks past. She notices Cass and hesitates, then tries to walk away quickly.
You're avoiding me, MPPL.
MPPL stops but doesn't turn around. She takes a deep breath, then slowly faces him.
We shouldn't do this here.
Then where? Because I need answers.
MPPL's eyes dart around, checking if anyone is watching. She exhales and leans in slightly. She bites her lip but doesn't respond.
It's not what you think.
Then tell me what it is. Tell me the truth. Is it mine?
It's complicated.
MPPL looks down, silent. KS exhales sharply, realization dawning on his face. The first issue related to the application of common law and equity in Malaysia is whether the High Court could exercise its inherent jurisdiction under Section 3 of the Civil Law Act 1956 to compel a child to undergo a DNA test in the absence of specific statutory provisions. The decision for Issue 1 is the High Court held that it had the authority to order the DNA test under its inherent jurisdiction, as recognized by English common law and incorporated into Malaysian law through Section 3 of the Civil Law Act 1956. The court reasoned that determining the child's paternity was in her best interest and welfare, emphasizing that a child's welfare and right to know her biological origins outweighed the objections raised by the defendants. The ratio decidendi for Issue 1 is, the court's decision was grounded in its inherent jurisdiction as parens patriae, which allows it to act in the best interests of a child. This principle, derived from English common law, is applicable in Malaysia under Section 3 of the Civil Law Act 1956. The court emphasized that the child's welfare is paramount, and establishing paternity serves this principle. Then, the stare decisis for Issue 1 is the court relied on the precedent set in Tony Pua Kiamwi v. Government of Malaysia and another appeal, 2019, 12 MLJ1, where the federal court held that courts could rely on common law principles to ensure fairness and justice in the absence of statutory provisions. Similarly, the High Court in this case applied common law to address the legislative gap regarding DNA testing in paternity disputes, ensuring the child's welfare was prioritized. Besides, the second issue is whether the presumption of legitimacy under Section 112 of the Evidence Act 1950 prevented the court from investigating biological paternity, despite the plaintiff's claims and the potential benefits to the child. The decision for Issue 2 is, the High Court ruled that the presumption of legitimacy under Section 112 of the Evidence Act 1950 did not preclude an inquiry into biological paternity. While the presumption establishes legal legitimacy, it does not bar the court from ordering a DNA test if doing so serves the child's welfare and right to know her biological origins. The ratio decidendi for Issue 2 is, the court clarified that the presumption of legitimacy under Section 112 of the Evidence Act 1950 is not absolute and does not prevent the investigation of biological paternity. The overriding consideration is the welfare of the child, which justifies the court's intervention to establish biological parentage. The stare decisis for Issue 2 is, the court referenced Re-H&A, Paternity, Blood Tests, 2002-1, FLR 1145, where the English court held that the welfare of the child is paramount and authorized DNA testing to protect the child's rights. The High Court applied this principle, determining that the presumption of legitimacy should not obstruct an inquiry into paternity if it serves the child's best interest. The overall judgment is, the High Court found that the plaintiff had discharged his burden of proof on a balance of probabilities by presenting evidence of a sexual relationship with the first defendant during the child's conception period. The court noted the first defendant's admission to the relationship and inconsistencies in her testimony, which undermined her credibility. The court ordered the defendants to ensure that the child undergo a DNA test at Hospital Tunku Azizah within 7 days. If the test confirmed the plaintiff as the biological father, the court directed that, first, the plaintiff be reintroduced into the child's life gradually under the guidance of a qualified child psychologist. Second, the parties appoint a psychologist within 21 days to facilitate the process, with liberty to apply to the court if disagreements arose.
A business office in Jakarta. Mr. Andika shakes hands with Mr. Lim, smiling confidently.
So, it's settled. You'll transport our goods to Malaysia safely and on time, right?
Of course, Ocean Masters Marine has never failed a client. You have my word.
A month later, in PT Karyasumiden's warehouse, Mr. Indika angrily looks at damaged goods and delayed shipments. He dials Mr. Lim's number furiously.
What is this? Half of the shipment is missing and the rest is damaged.
Mr. Andika, I understand your frustration, but shipping delays happen. It's beyond our control.
Not according to our contract. We had an agreement.
The first issue is whether the principles of equity could override statutory requirements under the National Land Code 1965 NLC, which mandates strict compliance with registration and procedural formalities for land transfers. The decision of it is the principles of equity could not override the statutory requirements under the NLC. The court affirmed that the sale and purchase agreements were incapable of being effected under the NLC because of the strict prohibition under sections 2051, 2141A and B against transferring a part of any undivided share in the land. The court upheld the primacy of statutory provisions over equitable considerations. The ratio decidendi, first issue, are the principles of equity cannot override the mandatory statutory requirements under the NLC, which strictly mandate compliance with procedural and registration formalities for any land transaction to be effective. Sections 205.1 and 214.1a and b of the NLC expressly prohibit the transfer of an undivided share in land without proper partition or registration, rendering the purported transaction legally ineffective. The unilateral execution of the sale and purchase agreements by one joint tenant, Aisha, without the consent of the other joint tenant, Khatija, and without compliance with statutory requirements did not sever the joint tenancy. As a result, the property remained part of the deceased's estate upon her death. The name of the precedent case is Tansui Lanvi Enku Nik Binti Enku Muda and Ores 1973 to MLJ 187. The principle is equity in joint tenancy. Common law protects the integrity of joint tenancy and ensures that co-tenants' rights are preserved unless severance is properly executed. In this case, the court must follow this principle, recognizing that Aisha's unilateral actions did not sever the joint tenancy, and the property interest remained intact until her death. The second issue is whether the plaintiffs, as purchasers, could invoke equitable principles such as specific performance, estoppel, or constructive trust to compel the defendants to complete the transfer of the property. The decision of it is the plaintiffs could not invoke equitable principles to compel the defendants to complete the transfer. The agreements between Aisha and the plaintiffs were declared void because they contravened statutory requirements under the NLC. Additionally, the court emphasized that equity could not be applied to bypass clear statutory prohibitions or requirements for registration and procedural formalities under the NLC. The ratio decidendi for second issue are the transfer of property or any undivided share in the land is subject to strict compliance with statutory requirements under the NLC. Any agreement that contravenes these statutory provisions is void and unenforceable, regardless of the parties' equitable claims. An agreement that is void for non-compliance with statutory requirements cannot be enforced through specific performance. Since the agreements between Aisha and the plaintiffs contravened the NLC, the plaintiffs could not compel the transfer of the property. The name of the precedent case, Ri Man Bin Mihat, DECD 1965, 2 MLJ1, and the principle is adherence to formalities for valid transactions. So, statutory formalities, such as registration and documentation, are essential for property transfers. Non-compliance renders a transaction void, regardless of equitable considerations. In Peter Chong, the agreements violated the NLC's requirements under Sections 2051 and 2141, making them unenforceable despite the plaintiff's reliance on equitable principles. The overall judgment is the court dismissed the plaintiff's claims against the first defendant, Khatija's estate, but ruled that the second defendant, Aisha's estate, must restore benefits received under the void agreements. Aisha's unilateral sale did not sever the joint tenancy due to lack of consent and non-compliance with NLC formalities. The agreements were void under Sections 2051, 2141A, and 2141B, and equitable principles could not override statutory law. The court also ruled that Mohammedan law did not apply to the conveyance, as it was governed by English law. Even if it did, Hibaropa, conditional gift, did not conflict with Islamic principles. Under Section 66 of the Contracts Act 1950, Aisha's estate had to restore the benefits received from the plaintiffs.
Inside Aisha's home, Aisha sits at the dining table with Peter Chong and another buyer. Several documents are spread out before them.
I have decided to sell my share of the property. Since my father and brother passed away, I believe this is the best decision for me.
Thank you, Madam Aisha. We have been interested in this property for a while. If everything is in order, we would like to proceed.
Here are the agreements. I will sign them now.
A law office. Khatija sits across from her lawyer, Ms. Tan, holding a legal notice. This letter says Peter Chong is claiming ownership of our family property. How is that possible? I never agreed to sell it.
It appears Aisha signed a sale agreement with him in 1990. Do you recall discussing this with her?
Never. We were joint owners. She had no right to sell the land without my consent.
Under the law, joint tenants must act together. Aisha could not legally transfer her share without your agreement. We will challenge this in court. This version follows the format of character name, followed by the script lines.
The first issue is the breach of contract. The decision is the court held the defendants liable for breach of contract as they failed to deliver the goods as promised. On the other hand, ratio decidendi is a breach occurs when a party fails to fulfill contractual obligations without legal justification, entitling the harmed party to compensation. Furthermore, stare decisis is referencing Sinaya and Sons, SN BHD v. Damaisedia, Set DN BHD, 2015. The court affirmed that contracts must be strictly honored unless legally excused. The second issue is whether equitable remedies, such as specific performance or injunctions, were appropriate in addition to common law damages. We needed to know if courts could issue special performance orders and protective actions alongside money compensation. The decision is due to financial compensation fully restored the plaintiff's losses. The court decided against awarding equitable remedies. Additionally, ratio decidendi is the court has the choice to grant equitable remedies when damage payments cannot fully solve the injury. Based on their assessment, damages were sufficient to make the plaintiff whole. Besides that, the stare decisis is the court-adopted Boosted Trading, 1985, SDN BHG v. Arab Malaysian Merchant Bank, BHD, 1995, 3 MLJ 331 to show that courts only grant equitable remedies when regular monetary compensation proves insufficient. Through this precedent, the courts determined they must evaluate competing parties' needs before taking action with specific performance or injunctions in rare instances. Under the current standard, the court found one type of financial compensation enough to cover all the plaintiff's affected areas. The third issue is whether the plaintiff's actions or omissions contributed to the delays or mishandling, invoking contributory negligence under equitable doctrines. The decision is due to the plaintiff's own negligence. The court decreased the funds granted to the plaintiff. In additon, the ratio decidendi is when the plaintiff caused harm to themselves through negligence, the court uses contributory negligence to decrease their recoverable damages in direct proportion to their fault. The stare decisis is the court used Mohad Zukairi Abd Ghaffar, Vkwek Cham Ki, 2004 5 MLJ 6 to explain how contributory negligence works. The court decided that when two parties equally create damage, they have to share the resulting compensation obligations. Following Mohad Zukairi Abd Ghaffar v. Kwek Cham Ki, 2004, the court examined how the plaintiff caused or prolonged the goods problems and reduced the compensation due to her partial responsibility. The overall judgment is, in many ways, their honors judgment was arrived at without undue bias towards one system of laws, but a blend of both common law and equity for fairness. In the case, it awarded damages to the plaintiff for the breach of contract, but recognized the defendant's contributory negligence defense. The judgment served to remind business parties that parties to a contract must deal with each other in good faith. Applying equitable principles, the court also showed Malaysia's adherence consistent with the country's hybrid system of law that combines common law and equity for fairness. In essence, Sections 3, 5, and 6 of the Civil Law Act 1956 work together like a legal tailor, carefully trimming and adjusting the role of English law in Malaysia. Section 3 decides where and when English common law applies, preventing it from overriding local laws unnecessarily. Section 5 ensures that outdated colonial laws, like an old-fashioned wig in a modern courtroom, are phased out. Section 6 then steps in to recognize the importance of local customs and personal laws, making sure Malaysia's legal system remains relevant to its diverse society.
Jessica, you are right. These sections are not just about legal rules. They reflect Malaysia's journey towards legal independence. They remind us that while our legal roots may have started in England, our laws must serve the Malaysian people, culture, and values. By balancing history with modern needs, the Civil Law Act ensures that Malaysia's legal system remains dynamic, practical, and uniquely its own. That's all from our group. Thank you.
Hope we will have chance to see you next time.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
dear.